Poke the Bear is brought to you by Fanduel, the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network.
And welcome back to Poke the Bear, episode 158, presented by our good friends over at Fanduel. Connor, we love Fanduel. We love Fanduel, and I know our listeners do as well. It has been a long time, so, Fanduel is our good friend now. But that is Conor Ryan. I am Evan Marinofsky. Connor, what is up?
Evan, I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. It's first week of August, which is crazy. Training camp feels like it kind of right around the corner. It's like a little over a month away. So that should be very interesting. But the last big, or actually, no, it's not the last big piece of Bruins news to drop, but one of the last offseason Bruins news, pieces of news to drop came earlier this week. Jeremy Swayman got his contract. Trent Frederic got his contract. Swayman comes in at 1 year, $3.475 million, and Frederic gets 2 years at $2.3 million per. Connor, were any of these surprising to you?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, I think you look at Swayman and what he got paid, it more or less was a kind of a 50-50 compromise in terms of what the team offered and what he was looking for. So 3.4 more or less falls right in the middle there. So I think you have to take that if you're the Bruins when you look at just how good Jeremy Swayman has been with this team at this young stage of his career. So that was to be expected. There's people who I think were projecting that Frederic was going to get 1.72 million, whatever. Like, I still think when you look at what his jump in production was last year, it made sense when you look at a few other guys, other comparables as third line players. That he was going to get a little over 2. So I wouldn't say there's necessarily any surprises with what the final payout was. It's now, I think, just what's next for those two players, right, in terms of what their roles are going to be. We kind of talked about Frederic quite a bit on Bruins Beat earlier this week, but that's one where if you're getting paid $2.3 million, it's, let's see what you can do in a featured role, right? Like, I don't think he's going to be a top 6 player, but he could be the guy that's given the keys to the third line, the 3C spot, if he's fighting with Morgan Kiki for that role. So, what is Frederic? Is he a guy who took a step forward, but also had a pretty, impressive shooting percentage surge? Like, that seems like it's bound to come back to earth. Like, can he be a consistent 15 to 20 goal scorer, or is he going to take a step back in that regard? So, as you said before, Evan, we are always endorsing any player to get the bag, get paid, especially when they've had very good years, as both those guys did. But now it's kind of the onus falls on the players themselves to continue to build off of that. I think Swayman, and in particular, we know how important he's going to be as part of that tandem with Olmark. But Frederic's going to be in a featured role. Like, he was an important part of that third line, but he wasn't necessarily the driver of that unit. Yeah, there's going to be a lot more responsibility falling on his shoulders this year, and a pretty critical spot in the lineup. So it's going to be key for the Bruins to have him take another big step forward after getting this new 2-year deal.
Yeah, I think over the course of this 2-year deal, we mentioned in our Bruins Beat, it's a bridge deal. It's sort of a prove me deal. You have every opportunity. You mentioned responsibility. On the other side of it, it's a lot of opportunity he has to, sort of solidify his role in the NHL. Is he going to be sort of a third line passenger, or is he going to drive play? Can he play center? And I think you're sort of going to find that out, or at least you hope to find that out over these 2 years. And then after that, if this is a guy who can get you 20 goals every year and be a, legitimate piece, then he gets more in his next deal, right? If he kind of is in and out of the lineup and up and down lines and not really producing a lot, then, it'll reflect that in the next contract. Swayman's interesting though, because I think we both were on team bridge deal with Frederic. That was not going to be a long-term thing. Swayman though, a little bit different. I think you and I both were in agreement that if you could get something long-term done, to get him locked up, 4 or 5 years at a price that might seem a little expensive now, but cheaper down the road, it would be good. But again, I think it goes back to they don't have the cap space. Like, you're not, next offseason, I think that's sort of the goal here is you get Swayman to the year, and then next offseason, you can give him more. You can give him longer term. You will have more cap space. Obviously, you hope you do other stuff with that cap space too, but in a perfect world, yeah. Now, again, I don't know, like we mentioned, signing him long-term to a deal that, won't look so bad in the future to avoid potentially down the road him commanding, 10 million or something like that. I don't know if that's going to happen in a year. Like, I think, again, he's going to be splitting the net with Ullmark, right?
Mhm.
And, he's not going to be, unless Ullmark goes down with an injury, he's not going to be playing an absurd amount of games. Maybe has a huge jump and he's in talks for the Vezina and things like that, but that's still only 1 year. So I do think for the Bruins, you still next offseason can negotiate a long-term deal with him that's fair for him, but it's not going to kill the team going forward.
Yeah, no, it's you kind of said it, Evan, where you look at just what hands, what kind of hand they were dealt this offseason with how little cap space they had. As you said, would they have loved to have offered him a 6-year deal at 4.5, 5, whatever, and just
that would have been
lock
so
that
good
in?
too.
Like,
That would have been so good.
Of course, you'd like to do that. Again, if the Bruins, believe that he can be a number one goalie for the foreseeable future, which I believe they think he can be that. But again, that just wasn't feasible this year. So I think when you look at what their options were after finding out what his salary was going to be this year, either sending him to a 1 or 2 year deal, at this point you kind of said it where you look at next offseason when you have a lot more cap flexibility. Why not? If you're going to kick this problem down the road, do it next year where he takes maybe another step forward instead of 2 years down the road where he's had 2 really good years. I mean, who the hell knows what happens 2 years down the road, whether he's the number one goalie anyway, what Ullmark is, or where exactly he fits into this team and the lineup. But if you're the Bruins and you want to, cross this off your to-do list sooner rather than later, might as well, bridge the gap this 1 year and then try to sign him long-term next year. Because I think the longer you push this off, let's say it was like they signed him to like a 3 or 4 year deal. Yeah, that's more term. That helps you out. But you're setting yourself up for, if he plays at a high level, what's that paycheck going to be in, makes you feel old, like 2027, right? Then all of a sudden you're looking at, if he's what you think he is, and he's, as you said, puts himself into the upper tier of elite goaltenders, then you're really paying a steep price. So if you continue to build off of what you saw last year, forms a really good tandem with Ullmark. They split those reps, barring something really catastrophic in terms of injuries, the defense falling apart. Both guys should continue to post really good numbers. Like, if you do that for 1 more year, then you set yourself up to, extend him long term. It fits in with what we've mentioned and what we've seen time and time again with this team in terms of setting that foundation for the future. If you're able to, after next year, where guys have taken more steps forward and you can build off of guys like Pastrnak and McAvoy and Lindholm and all these guys signed long term, and adding a guy like Swayman to the mix makes plenty of sense. Just was not feasible this year with what little cap space you had.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I like the 1 year because you can just, again, you're kicking this to next season. Now, again, if next offseason you sign him to a 1 or 2 year deal or even a 3 year deal, I'm going to hate that, unless he's like terrible this year. Right. But like, if it's next offseason, if it's 2 or 3, like this was my issue with the McAvoy thing back in 2019 when they signed him. Was that a 3 year deal they nabbed him at before the long-term deal? I didn't like it because you have a good idea that he's going to blossom into, you hope, at least a top 10 defenseman in the NHL. Now he's pretty much top 5. And his value soared in those 3 years. Now, if you at the time had nabbed him at 6, 7 years and given him, I don't know, what was feasible then? 6, 7 million, right? Like, I forget their cap situation back in 2019. It couldn't have been amazing. But if you could have done that, you avoid, now again, his contract will be fine going forward as the cap goes up and this and that, but you probably could have saved yourself some money with McAvoy earlier on. And maybe, that makes a bigger contract down the road. But I like that they just went with a year here because, again, it wasn't, as you said, it wasn't feasible to do a long-term deal this offseason. But it brings up an interesting point. Is there a way to create additional cap space? Because I'll be honest, I was reading some stories this morning, and I think it was in The Athletic, and they were writing a story about Elias Lindholm, and the trade partners and the perfect fits. And they said, well, the Bruins are the perfect fit. They need him. He's a good, solid defensive center. I think he comes in at like 4.8 million for his final year this year. So it wouldn't be anything crazy. There's just one issue. The Bruins don't really have anything to trade, and they can't really compete with your Carolinas and your Columbuses and some of those teams.
Football season is about to kick off, and Fanduel is giving you the chance to win all season long. Because right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. Just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you'll get bonus bets for every victory. You can use your bonus bets on spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. And frankly, that's the best part about FanDuel, is that you can bet on anything. You want to bet on how many touchdowns Mac Jones is going to throw this year? Be my guest. Maybe how many wins the Bruins are going to have in 2023-24. Go for it. You can do it all. So bet now on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. So visit FanDuel.com/Boston and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/Boston.
But nevertheless, I mean, is there a way to create additional cap space? Because if you are good and you need to make moves at the deadline this upcoming year, you're going to need some space. I mean, is there anything they can do in this final month of the summer?
Yeah, it's going to be very tricky in terms of shedding a lot of cap space without subtracting probably useful players off the roster. I mean, even if you look at it right now, if barring them making any other move, you're probably rolling out a 22-man roster to open the year, right, just to make the money work. So you're already kind of limiting your depth in that regard. But you know, are you looking at waiving another guy like a Zaboral, sending him down to Providence to be clears down there and saving another $1 million against the cap? You know, could Forbort be a guy that could be on his way out if that's the case and they're really desperate? Which again, even though he can maybe be somewhat of a divisive player, I think Forbort still has value if he's just slotted in as your third pairing PK guy. Like, you don't want to give him up for nothing or just send, kind of the same with Mike Riley, where I think we both were in agreement that even if he maybe has some flaws in his game, he shouldn't be spending the entire year down in Providence.
Correct.
Shouldn't be the case for a guy like Forbort as well, right? So they're going to have to get very creative because, again, would they like to shed another $3-4 million in cap space? Yeah, but I mean, look at this offseason where so many teams were just, stuck in purgatory because of that cap space. They didn't want to either take on money, send money out. It's just everything's gridlocked right now. So it's going to be easier said than done. It's going to be a very, very busy and hectic year, I think, for Evan Gold, because there's no easy way to really kind of manufacture that much cap space when it seems like they are going to be doing quite a bit. I don't think Lauko is going to be the guy that's going to be in that situation again, but it's going to very much feel like there's going to be a few guys that are going to be up and down on the transaction wire all year long just to kind of make that money work.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, again, if they make a trade, then, you have to send players back in that deal or a subsequent deal. I mean, let's say in a perfect world, let's say they do trade for Lindholm this offseason, right? Let's say that the contract talks in Calgary go south and, Craig Conroy has to trade Lindholm, and he trades him. He wants to trade him in the Bruins for some reason. Whatever the package is, you're going to need to clear some space. And, if you do get a Lindholm, you have to think you're not only going to lose, pieces going back in that deal, but you're also probably going to lose pieces dealing roster players to other teams, just like sort of like a Taylor Hall trade, and not that drastic. But let's say it was a Forbort, right? You're not getting anything for him. You're not getting a single thing for Derek Forbort in that situation at all. So teams will know that they kind of have you, and so again, I don't think there's a clear path. It's not like, you're gonna have to trade Taylor Hall here. Like, there's nothing clear here. And again, they don't have to at the current moment, but I think a little breathing room wouldn't hurt. But again, we'll sort of see. There's a buyout window, right, coming in the next 24 hours, correct? And it's only for guys over $4 million.
Yeah, exactly. That's the biggest hurdle. I think if you were looking at that and it wasn't a cap, kind of parameter there, then maybe it is, again, Forbort's a useful player, but maybe you have to kind of bite the bullet in that regard, but it doesn't seem like that's feasible, obviously, with just the way the salary works in terms of how much he commands on their books. So, again, that's one where it could be useful, but if there's anyone you want to remove from the roster, it has to be a pretty vital player that, if you're the Bruins, you're hoping is part of what, it is a grouping of this next kind of wave of talent that you hope is competitive this upcoming year. So I don't really see an avenue for them to do that just through the buyout window.
Yeah, I don't see that as feasible either. It just doesn't. I mean, you're done dealing away top roster players again, unless you do the Lindholm route or you trade for someone, which I'm going to be honest now with the Bruins lock, Lindholm will re-sign in Calgary to a huge contract. And then like the hurdle, remember that? And it's like, oh, what are you sticking around here for? But even then, like, I think in some way, and I know it's not as interesting, but it feels like wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if they waited for a center next offseason and sort of saw what they had with Coyle and Zacha down the middle. I don't think it's a long-term solution at all. I think they sort of we said this last year, tread water, which last year they did more than tread water. They friggin' walked on it. But again, I just look at, maybe you can skate by this year with Coyle and Zacha. And then you look at next off season. Now, one other thing that they have to sort of consider is they don't have a first, second, or third round pick next year, which you have to find a way to get back in that. You have to find a way to get either a second, a first would be tough. But I mean, to me, I think the most important thing is you have to draft in the first 3 rounds next year. I don't know how you do it. You'd have to give up something legitimate because draft picks are worth quite a lot. But I think that, something needs to be done for that. I think you can skate by with Coyle and Zacha. I don't know if you can get by with no first, second, or third round pick next year for that. That's something that we can dive into more another day because I think we're going to hit on that a lot this this upcoming season. Speaking of things for this current season, the captaincy, it is open. And we assume our prediction is David Krejci doesn't come back, and that's not insider info. We're just predicting. So we're going to go with Krejci's not in the conversation for this. Who is your next captain, Connor?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's Marchand. I can see the argument for maybe opting for someone younger, but I think when you're going through this kind of transition period for the Bruins, I still think you want a veteran, steadying kind of presence back there. And again, Marchand, they cut from a different club, Chara or Bergeron, but he's kind of that last remaining link from that kind of era that you have there. And again, this is the guy that you ask anyone, either Marchand himself or his former coaches, teammates. I mean, he was pretty much an understudy of Bergeron and really kind of followed everything he did in terms of his commitment, will to win, leadership, all that stuff. So, and I also think he's just earned it from, the journey he's been on. And yes, I'm sure if he is the one that gets to see on his sweater, hockey Twitter, opposing fan bases might lose their minds. But I think for anyone who's kind of seen his growth, see how he's viewed in that locker room, his accountability, accessibility, all that stuff, I think it's kind of a no-brainer, even if it is for a short term, 2, 3, 4 years in terms of how much he wants to keep on playing Brad Marchand at 35. But I think in terms of the merit, his relationship with Bergeron, all those kind of things, I think it's a no-brainer in my book, but I can also see why maybe they're looking through a different lens in terms of looking a little bit longer term in terms of other, again, deserving candidates that are still on this roster.
Yeah, I understand the McAvoy thing. I do. The comments he made in that au revoir Patrice Bergeron video were telling. Those were interesting. Because you kind of watch those, you're like, oh, that's cool. Oh, that's really nice. And then I was like, wait, what did he say? Marchand's a no-brainer. I don't know. I think everyone's overthinking it. Again, maybe the team is looking towards the future. They've given McAvoy a ton of money. They've given Pastrnak a ton of money. Those are sort of going to be the 2 pillars. I think they hope for the next 10 years, things project like that'll be the case. Marchand's been around so long, and I think he's done a lot to get away from the reputation he had at the beginning of his career. I think he's earned it. I think he's been he understands that culture. He was part of the building of that culture. You mentioned the understudy of Bergeron. I think that's another big part of it. It would be weird, I think. I mean, think about it. If they, and again, I know it's the captaincy, but it still is a big thing. It's still symbolic. And you sort of go down in history, and, you look at, would it be really weird if McAvoy was captain and then there was Marchand as the assistant? Like, who is really the captain there. Like, I don't know. I think it's a really good opportunity to give Marchand the C, let McAvoy and Pasternak sort of continue to study under Marchand in that sense. And you have guys like Coyle and Carlo and some of your other younger players coming through. Marchand as the C makes sense. And again, I get the arguments for McAvoy, but I think Marchand should be it. He's been around so long. The other thing is, like, I mentioned, it'd be a little weird just to see like Marchand with an A and a much younger player with a C, because he's earned, like, Marchand genuinely has earned it. Like, I don't know how much longer Marchand has here, but I just think if you don't make Marchand the captain, I don't know. I don't love that move. Like, not that it would sour things, but like, if Marchand's not the captain, what are you keeping him around for? Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I get the on ice component, but I've said this to some other people, and I might get some hate for this, and I've kind of hinted at it on other podcasts we've done. But like, if a general manager came in that had no connection to the Bruins, right? No connection, looked at the situation and said, okay, they need a little bit of a retool here. It wouldn't shock me if that general manager said, Marchand's a guy, if we don't make him captain, we could probably get a lot for. And, it's a palatable contract. He's still very valuable, but he did have double hip surgery last offseason. Like, that's a way to get back in the first round. But if you make him captain, then it's like, oh, that's a guy you want here. He's worth it. You're going to get production from. So yeah, I mean, I think Marchand as captain makes the most sense. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Absolutely. I agree. No, I don't think you have to overthink it. It just makes, I think, the most sense, especially just in the show. Even if it's for a few years, I think he's well earned it.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Obviously, yes. People on Twitter will say, "Oh, is he going to lick everybody?" This and then. It's like, no. I understand the opposing fan base is getting all bent out of shape about it, but again, I think he's earned it, and he deserves it. And it'd be interesting to see if he changes his how he he's very open with media and stuff, and I'm curious, like, if that changes if he's named captain. But yeah, I think he earns it, and I think the Bruins will do something fun for it. They'll have some sort of rollout for it, or they'll do it during camp, or like, remember when the Chara retired and Chara got traded, or not traded, he signed with the Caps, and they gave the C to Marchand. Maybe they can do it for real this time. So, anyways, that has been this episode. Of course, brought to you by our good friends over at Fanduel. Connor, what can people look forward to from you over at Boston.com and the Boston Globe?
Yeah, we're going to have you covered throughout this off season as we wait for any other remaining news. I think we'll finally be able to start looking at lineup projections, younger players that can make an impact on this Bruins lineup. Again, I've been over at Patriots training camp this whole week as well, so I have you covered on stuff beyond just hockey.
Is that a sunburn on your neck, or is it the lighting?
I think it's definitely a sunburn. A little bit.
That's where you got it.
Yeah, I have a dreadful sunburn on my legs. It looks comical. I don't want to stand up to show it because it looks.
Yeah, don't do that, or
red.
don't put your leg up in the shot or something.
Yes, exactly. I don't want you to I'm wearing like boxers or anything like that. I'm not. I'm wearing shorts, but I'm in quite a bit of pain today, Evan. I've learned my lesson. It's a little bit different from going to a rink every day where you can wear a nice little zip up sweatshirt, all that good stuff. Not afforded that luxury covering football. But again, want to read all of my stuff over at Boston.com, please do that. Our staff is great. We have a whole bunch of stuff throughout the season for all the major sports in Boston. So please do that. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can at Conor Ryan _93.
Go do all that. It's funny you mentioned the being outside. I was saying to someone recently at a rink, I was like, rinks can be really cold, but we never deal with the elements. You don't have to deal with rain and snow and muddy grass. It's just cold, but it's like man-made cold, so it's not bad.
Bring some layers. We'll
take it. We'll take it. But anyway, that's Conor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky. Poke the Bear listeners. Have a great rest of your week.